Many people never achieve their goals because they have too many toxic, negative, energy draining people in their lives. And you have to have goals outside of your comfort zone that will challenge you, because in order to do something you've never done, you've got to become someone you've never been. And you got to have a mentor who's experienced, who's been there, done that. And as a result of that relationship, because you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. Muhammad Ali said, "I'm the greatest," but he never won a championship without Angelo Dundee. And Michael Jordan never won a championship without Phil Jackson. So you've got to have someone that can see something in you that you can't see, that can take you to a place within yourself that you can't go by yourself.
Hey everybody, today's episode is brought to you by our very own Impact Theory University. Enjoy the episode. Hey everyone, welcome to Impact Theory. Today's guest is a best-selling author and one of the most lauded and sought-after speakers on the planet. But nobody would have predicted that given where he started. Born on the dirty floor of an abandoned building, he and his twin brother were later adopted and raised as two of 7 children to a single mother who struggled to make ends meet. He was deemed teachable but mentally retarded when he was a kid, and classmates referred to him as the dumb twin. Despite all of this, however, one day, while shining shoes, he paid attention to the powerful words of the motivational tapes one of his most successful customers was listening to. The message made him realize that with enough effort, he could turn his life around. He began reading and drinking in as much wisdom as humanly possible, and after years of relentlessly improving his skill set and receiving encouragement from mentors, he stepped into what he now calls his power voice. Since then, he has hosted popular national TV and radio talk shows, won a Chicago area Emmy, spoken to crowds as large as 80,000 people, written best-selling books, and received the National Speakers Association's most prestigious award, the Golden Gavel. He was named by Toastmasters International as one of the top 5 outstanding speakers in the world, and he's been featured by NBC, Success Magazine, Inc., and the Washington Post, to name but a few. So please, help me in welcoming the man who refused to accept the limitations placed on him by others, the multiple-term state representative for Ohio, who can count AT&T, Disney, and IBM among his staggering client roster. One of the most powerful orators and teachers of our time, Les Brown. What's up, brother? How you doing, man?
Great, thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Dude, it is so good to have you. You are an unparalleled motivational preacher. And I use that word very intentionally. You have a way of conveying a message with such chills-inspiring, goosebump-giving power. It's really, really extraordinary to witness, and becomes all that much more powerful knowing that you didn't start there, that wasn't sort of naturally, your beginning, and you've called life a battle for territory.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
That the things that you get in life, Frederick Douglass said, we might not get everything that we fight for, but everything we get, it will be a fight. So, and I love the quote that life is a fight for territory. And once you stop fighting for what you want, what you don't want will automatically take over. Like getting ready to come here to see you. I want to just, first of all, thank you for the great work that you're doing. I watch you and I study you, and you have had some incredible guests that impacted my life. And preparing to come here, I'm being treated by Cancer Centers of America for 4th stage cancer, which I've been kicking cancer's butt for 27 years. And I've been working on getting a 6-pack before getting here. I still got 1 pack. And I've been working to get some muscles so I can wear my T-shirt, but they weren't large enough, so I wore a long sleeve.
That's amazing, man. Talk to me about cancer. You've had such an upbeat attitude about it. It's really pretty extraordinary. Was that your initial reaction? Did you go through a trough of despair when you first got diagnosed? Like, how have you framed that?
Dr. Alfred Golson, who has since passed, was a very unusual guy. And he told me, he said, Mr. Brown, you have cancer. I said, can you give me a second opinion? He said, yes, and you're ugly too. I said, oh my God. So I didn't have a chance to have fear because, those three words, you have cancer, three of the most feared words in 7 different languages. I saw it as a fight. And from that time to this time, my PSA was 2,400. And that stands for prostate-specific antigen, and now it's below 0 and metastasized in 7 areas of my body, which was a good thing because 7 is my lucky number. Okay, so I never was fearful that I was going to die from it, and I think that I read something by Dr. Norman Cousins. He wrote a book called The Biology of Hope, and he talked about the fact that when something happens to you, you don't deny it, you defy it. And I was defiant that I'm going to beat this, I'm going to handle this. That there are people who many times when something happens to them, that they embrace it from a place of fear and it takes them out. And L.C. Robinson said, things may happen to you and things may happen around you, but the most important things are the things that happen in you. And you have to stand up inside yourself and deal with it and handle it. So fortunately, that never bothered me, but I had sciatica pain. That had me speaking in unknown tongues. And I was in a wheelchair for several months, speaking from a wheelchair. And it was something that I dealt with that frightened me. Will this ever end? It was 24 hours. I lost a lot of sleep. It was exhausting going from all type of specialists in and out of the country. And just one day, it stopped. And I'm glad that I'm past that. I feel like when you go through some stuff, there's some certain things that you don't want ever to see again, and that's what I don't want to ever see again. But fear has not been the biggest challenge that I've faced with the things that I've been dealing with in terms of my health.
Well, talk to me about the process that you go through mentally. So there have been a few times in your life in getting to know your story where they seem like really key inflection points. Being told that you were teachable but mentally retarded, that for sure is something that would define most people, and they would have a hard time escaping that. Being told that you have cancer, that it's stage 4, that they don't know how to treat it, that's something that consumes most people. How do you build that resilience? So maybe by the time you get to cancer, you've already done so much work, so I get maybe how that one you're protected by the mechanisms you've built, but in the beginning, how did you crawl out from under the labels that people were putting on you?
The easiest thing I've done was to get out from under the labels and to live the life that I live. The most difficult thing I've ever done was to believe that I can do it.
What's the difference?
The difference is that when you don't know what's impacting you, and it's something that's holding you down and you're not aware of it. The great anthropologist Margaret Mead was in a restaurant in London, and a guy was serving her and said, "There's several Americans here tonight." And she said, "Is that right?" "Yeah." So let me know when you serve them dessert. I'll tell you exactly how many are here. He said, "Oh, you couldn't possibly." And so he came back and said, "Okay, I've done it." And she got up and she walked around and she came back and she said, "There are around 25 here." And he looked at the roster. "How did you know that?" Say, "In America, we eat differently from you when we eat a dessert. You eat it from the crust toward the tip. We eat it from the tip toward the crust. When you eat a slice of pie, how do you eat yours?"
Definitely, yeah, from the tip back to the crust, for sure.
Yeah, okay, and so there are things that when you, in my situation, when you live in a dominant culture that is designed to destroy your sense of self and your belief in yourself, and you have to learn ways in which you can begin to connect with this power that you have within yourself to handle where you are. The key is to be constantly in a perpetual process of discovering the truth of who you are and fighting constantly to look for ways in which you can escape the inner conversation. I speak to audiences around the world, and I train speakers as well, and I tell them that when you speak, that there's an objective that you want to achieve when you speak to an audience, because how people live their lives is a result of the story they believe about themselves. So you as a speaker, when you speak in this program, when people see you, what you do is distract, dispute, and inspire. You distract people from their current story with your guests and the questions that you ask. Through the process of the ongoing questioning and the way in which they respond and the things they have learned, you dismantle their current belief system and inspire them to create a new chapter with their lives. And so, but that's an ongoing process of constantly interrupting that conversation, what psychologists call your self-explanatory style, because life is going to beat up on you in so many ways, and many things, they come back, negative thoughts and how you feel about yourself, they don't die. They come back once you stop doing the maintenance work on your mind, listening to motivational messages, going to seminars and workshops, spending time quietly listening to the still small voice within. Who am I really? Is this really me? Am I giving my best? Am I just reflecting what's around me? Because all of these various things affect how we show up in life. And so having a strategy to continuously find ourselves reaching higher. Robert Schuller had a book, is not very popular, but I loved it. It's called Peak to Peak, U-P-E-A-K to P-E-E-K, because you're constantly reaching higher to find out and discover your better self.
Yeah, I want to talk about that difference between, so you have the notion of figuring out who you really are, and I assume you mean beneath the labels. So people are telling me that I'm not smart, but that's not necessarily true. Mm-hmm. So I want to get down to that layer of what I'm really capable of. But you also talk about, we have this profound ability to change, and you talk about people needing to be relentless, like to relentlessly pursue that growth. I find that juxtaposition incredibly interesting, where you've got, there is a real you, which maybe you would call potential, mm-hmm. and then there is the actualized potential. Is that how you see it, or is there something else there?
Absolutely. There's a real you. Richard Wright said it best. He said, the impulse to dream has slowly been beaten out of me through the experiences of life. So when you live in a culture that is designed to destroy your sense of self, where you are marginalized, where you have a feeling of being hopeless and powerless, and you're terrorized. I remember going downtown with my mother, and I saw a water fountain. I think I was about 5 years old, and I ran and I drank from the water fountain. All of a sudden, she grabbed me by the neck and said, "Don't you ever do that again," and start punching me in the back of my head and my face, and got me down on the ground, was punching me relentlessly. And I said, "Mama, please, it's me, Mama, it's me," with this crazed look in her eyes. And then a white policeman came, and he had a nightstick in his hand. He was hitting it in his left hand. Oh. He said, "Okay, all right, you beat that little nigger boy enough. Now I won't have to beat him with this nightstick." And he walked away laughing. And my mother broke down and started crying and saying, "Leslie, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I said, "Mama, why'd you beat me like that?" She said, "These water fountains are for white only, son. And if that cop had hit me with his nightstick, he would have to kill me. I'd have fought him till he killed me, and I'd left you and your brothers and sisters by themselves to raise themselves. I'm so sorry." And the book called Learned Optimism, Seligman talk about the fact that between ages 0 and 5, we determine what's available to us and what's not available to us. And so that was a defining moment. I knew there are certain things I could not do, certain places I could not go. They used to have signs on Miami Beach that said, "Jews, dogs, and coloreds not allowed." And so now you have to operate within the constraints of the dominant society and the things that they have created for you. And it's a challenge to see yourself beyond that and to work to get outside of that, even after those laws have changed, because that has become so much a part of you. You unconsciously operate within the parameters of what has been put in place. Like you're driving on the expressway, the 405, and you'll get off on an exit that you weren't going in that direction, but you unconsciously did it because you've done it so many times that many people, because they're not making a conscious, deliberate, determined effort to think outside of what life has thrown at them, they end up doing the same thing over and over and over again. Einstein said that thinking that has brought me this far has created some problems that this thinking can't solve. And so through relationships, through reading, through studies, through goals and dreams beyond your comfort zone, it allows you to begin to live out of your imagination as opposed to out of your history. Disney said, the imagination is a preview of what's to come. And so as a kid, I dreamed a lot about taking care of my mother. I used to go with her to work to clean homes, and she kept their children, and she cooked for these wealthy families. My mother could bake a sweet potato pie so good you couldn't eat it with your shoes on. You had to take your shoes off so you could wiggle your toes. And I used to look at these big, beautiful mansions and said, Mama, what is it, Leslie? When I become a man, I'm going to buy you a big, beautiful home just like this. Oh, you don't have to do this. I said, I know, but you didn't have to adopt us either. And you did. And so I'm here with you because of two women. One gave me life, the other one gave me love. God took me out of my biological mother's womb and placed me in the heart of my adopted mother. And because of her example and my love for her and the passion that I felt in my heart, I've got to do something to make her proud. I've got to do something to put myself in position to be able to take care of her. That drove me. Nietzsche said, if you know the why for living, you can endure almost anyhow.
Jesus, man, that was a lot. I want to go back to this notion of dominant culture. You look so young. I forget how long you have been walking this planet.
75. I'm 75 years old.
It's fucking incredible, man. So
thank you.
You have so much optimism. You're so positive. You're so quick to laugh. Going back to the way that the dominant culture can dismantle so many people, what are ways that the dominant culture is dismantling people's creativity, their very spirit today, that people should be watching out for?
Well, just think about if you were an immigrant and you're watching television and you see people who can come from white cultures with no problems whatsoever, like the president's in-laws, but brown people coming from other countries, they're separated from their children and put in cages, and there's a silence. There's not millions of people protesting and saying, this is not who we are as a country. This is inhumane. I believe that all of us have a responsibility that we want to live a life that will outlive us. The work that you're doing. There are people that you will never meet, whose lives that you've transformed, that you're living a life that will outlive you. Just think about the fact that this program has given a lot of people hope, and there's hope in the future. It gives you power in the present. Every 40 seconds, someone commits suicide. But because of something you say or some guest that you've invited, and as they share their story, you interrupt that story of being hopeless and powerless and not wanting to be here anymore. And because they took the time to watch, you create an experience. Oliver Wendell Holmes said that once a man or woman's mind has been expanded with an idea, concept, or experience, it can never be satisfied to going back to where it was. And so at the end of the program, at the end of one of your presentations, there are people who, because of you, their lives will be transformed, and they will become a pencil, as Mother Teresa would say, in the hand of God, and start writing a new chapter with their lives.
I want to talk about that writing a new chapter. So you've talked about the little voice that people have, the need to create quiet space to hear that. Combine that with the notion of the culture sort of chipping away at people, and whether it's based on race and oppression, or whether it's just the school system teaching you to be a good cog in the machine, or whatever other things people have to fight against. How can people that are listening to this now, especially if they're an adult that's got all those labels put on them, that's had their creativity squished, what process do they do to hear the voice? What sort of communion can they do to create that imagination that's going to allow them to get out of that and move towards something new?
That's the reason why you designed this program, you and your team, for them to do that they have to expose themselves to something that will give them a different vision of themselves. And in addition to that, they have to put themselves in a community of what I call OQP, only quality people. A gentleman who